Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. Of course, the most important updates are coming from the Vuhledar direction, from the Kurakhove direction, from the Pokrovsk direction. We have a lots of updates from the northern Kupyansk direction, but this video I would like to start with the Zaporozhye direction. Just few words, because we received lots of very interesting updates that are very important, and probably they will change the situation on the ground in the very near future, but for now it's not very important in comparison with the situation, for example, in Vuhledar. First, I would like to talk with you about this icon, about the village, about the city of Nikopol. This is very important video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see the work of Russian drone, very interesting drone that was attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine with the missiles. As you can see, this is not a flamethrower drone that Ukrainians managed to create a few weeks ago, and they began using this type of weapon massively. This is not just a regular FPV drone or Baba Yaga with the explosives on board. This is most likely a helicopter type drone with the missiles on board. The Russians are flying above the city of Nikopol, and the Russians are attacking the positions of armored forces of Ukraine. Of course, they're attacking the Ukrainian forces not with cruise missiles, of course, just a small missiles that can probably deal damage to some buildings, maybe to set them on fire, maybe to destroy some ammo depot or another warehouse. Anyway, this is very important and very interesting, let's say, construction that was made by the Russians. Now let's move further. Let's talk a little bit about the city of Zaporozhye. Today is the second day in a row when the Russians continue bombing and attacking the city in the southern part of Ukraine with missiles and with guided bombs. And you know that yesterday we got a few videos and few updates of how the Russians were bombing the territory of the city, and now we continue receiving updates, and we got another video. This is very important because most likely the Russians do have some plans to begin offensive operation in the Zaporozhye direction. When exactly the Russians are planning to do this, nobody knows for sure, but the sources are saying that the Russians have concentrated significant number of forces exactly in this direction. The Ukrainians, of course, can see everything, and for example in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were counter-attacking and were attacking the Russian positions somewhere deep inside of the Zaporozhye area, with the purpose probably to destroy another warehouse or the ammo depot. Now let's move further, and now let's talk about Vuhledar. There are very heavy clashes right now on the ground. We have very important changes on the ground, so let's start. And let's start from the most important piece of news. According to information we have, according to neutral map, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt in the eastern part of the city and to enter the territory of Stronghold. So this piece of news we received somewhere yesterday in the evening, so most likely during the previous few hours the Russians managed to improve their positions. I will not be surprised if the Russians manage already establish complete control over this territory, over everything that located inside of this red line. Obviously, the battle for Vuhledar will be finished very soon. The Ukrainians are in panic. This is real disaster, real catastrophe for the Ukrainians. They understand that most likely after the fall of Vuhledar, it's very difficult to understand and very difficult to project where exactly the Ukrainians are able to stop the Russians next. We have the map of fire anomalies, and as you can see, according to different data, we see that the Russians are bombing just two cities, the village of Ukrainka and the town of Bogoyavlenka. So these two territories under very heavy fire. The Russians are bombing reinforcements, reserves, logistic, possible positions, headquarters, everything that Ukrainians were using to supply and support forces in Vuhledar. Obviously, we can make a conclusion that this stronghold of Vuhledar is already in cauldron or operational encirclement, and we have additional changes on the ground between the stronghold of Vuhledar and the village of Novoukrainka. In this video we can see another Russian attack with a significant number of armored vehicles, tanks, personal carriers that were moving from the south, from the river of Kashlagach in the direction of Novoukrainka. The Ukrainians were trying to slow the Russians down, but we see that Ukrainians haven't managed to stop even a single tank. The Russians were moving, and basically the Russians stopped when their fuel tanks were completely empty, and then they landed and secured the territory. Now we see that the Russians are moving further in the northern direction, and they will continue doing this most likely. Very difficult to understand where exactly the Russians are planning to stop, but obviously a few more kilometers in the northern direction and in the northeastern direction the Russians may try to cross and to create something like this. And after this configuration, the Ukrainians, if the Ukrainians are still in Vuhledar, they would be forced to fall back. Now let's move further and let's talk about Kurakhove area. The source reported that the Russians are pushing the Ukrainian forces, and as for the Kurakhove direction, the most important piece of news is coming from the village by the name of Vuhledar. Today, pro-Russian sources, pro-Russian mappers and neutral mappers reported that as a result of very heavy clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Vuhledar, and basically to create a cauldron for those Ukrainian forces who are currently located between the fields. Because now the distance between Russian edge positions between the Vuhledar and farms in the northwestern part of Krasnogorovka is less than 4 kilometers. Most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to leave their fields during the next few days because the territory is already under complete Russian fire control. We are not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, obviously maybe a few hundreds, maybe just not more than 200 soldiers are currently located in these fields, and most likely during the breakthrough attempts to escape the complete encirclement, the Ukrainians will lose another 30-40%, but anyway, the situation is critical but not like catastrophe. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Tsukurina. The Russians yesterday, if you remember, published the video of how they were attacking along this road towards the railways, and as a result of attack the Russians captured positions along the railways, and we have adjusted the map. And today we continue receiving updates about additional Russian progress, and as a result of clashes during the previous 12 hours, the Russians managed to take under control the stronghold that located to the south of the coal mine by the name of Selidova. So this territory was captured, and the Russians made another step to get closer to the village of Tsukurina, and the current distance between the edge Russian positions, possible edge positions, and Ukrainian first buildings in the village varies from 600 meters to 830 meters, which is already nothing. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Toretsk, New York direction. We haven't received anything. Let's move to the Kupyansk direction. We have additional changes on the ground in the vicinity of the flower body of Pishana. According to different mappers, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions, and they got closer to the village of Kurakhove. And if you remember, yesterday we were talking that most likely the Russians will attack further in the southern direction towards the village of Lazova, with the purpose to force the Ukrainian forces that are currently located among these fields to fall back. So most likely during the next few days we will color this territory completely under Russian control, because if the Ukrainians stay there, they will be encircled and destroyed. The Russians continue bombing and destroying Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian positions on the territory of the Kupyansk agglomeration during the previous 24 hours. The Minister of Defense of Russian Federation published the video of how attacked and destroyed a huge ammo depot that located in the southwestern part of the city of Kupyansk. Now let's move further. We have changes, significant changes in the situation in the Kharkiv direction. Basically, the Russians intensified their activity. The Russians began attacking the Ukrainian logistic. In this video we can see the bridge in the central part of Liptsi that was destroyed as a result of most likely Russian Ha-38 or 35 missile strike. Furthermore, we have additional activities in the southern part of Volchansk and along the border in the Zolochiv direction. Now let's talk about the Kursk offensive, the Kursk direction. We have important changes on the ground, and as you can see, we have colored completely the village by the name of Mala Loknya. The battle for this territory have been taking place since the beginning of August. The Russian soldiers were fighting with the Ukrainians completely encircled. The Russians made a lot of attempts to unblock their forces in the territory of this small settlement, but all Russian attempts failed, and the Ukrainians slowly but step by step were moving by trying to attack this village from many directions. And for example, in this video, exactly in this episode, we can see how the Russians were bombing the city of Maloloknya by themselves. So most likely when the Russians realized that there are no chances for evacuation or unblocking, when the Ukrainians entered the territory of this small town, the Russian soldiers on the ground asked to attack themselves, and the Russians begin bombing the already former Russian positions. Anyway, based on these geolocations, we have colored this territory under complete Ukrainian control. Now the Ukrainians managed to release additional forces. They will stretch this force along the line of combat contact. Maybe some forces, some reserves would be sent in the western direction with the purpose to counterattack the Russians, or at least to stabilize the line of combat contact in this area. As for Vysyola direction, Kurakhove region, we haven't received any changes on the ground, just some updates that were published by the Russians, how they were hunting and destroying Ukrainian vehicles in this territory. This is basically the second cemetery of the Western equipment, or the third cemetery. It's very difficult already to count, but also the Ukrainians during these attempts lost significant number of vehicles and forces trying to attack the Russian positions. The only video that was published from the Ukrainian side is how they managed to discover the positions of Russian air defense systems in the vicinity of this town by the name of Rylsk, and as a result of Iskander strike, the Ukrainians managed to destroy few Russian Buk M3 air defense systems. This is exactly the moment when the Ukrainians attacked this territory with the HIMARS systems. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes during my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.